What if we could treat diseases of the brain outside of the brain just by targeting the skin? And that idea is at the heart of what I'll talk about today. Let me begin by connecting with you all first on a personal level by showing you some pictures of some of my beautiful family members. So here you can see a picture of me with my daughter, with my wife, actually one of my sisters, with my son. One thing that's at the heart of all of these photos is touch. Just imagine in your own lives when you have some good news or something wonderful happens to you. What's one of the first things you do? You connect with those closest to you, and oftentimes you engage with a hug. Or think about times in your life when you're sad or down or depressed or going through a traumatic experience. We rush to find our loved ones, and we often engage with a hug or a warm embrace. Why do we do this? Touch is a powerful form of healing that I think we all can appreciate. Now, let me drive this point home a little bit further with two additional examples about the importance and the power of social touch. So there are many children who are born preterm in this country, and unfortunately, some of them do not survive these early time periods or even thrive in these critical days. But one form of approved treatment is this so-called kangaroo care with skin-to-skin touch and contact. This is so powerful that doesn't even have to be delivered by a relative of the infant. Doctors actually recruit in people who can come in and touch and stroke these kids, and it really helps them to thrive. Or another example at the far end of the spectrum is during the COVID-19 pandemic, which we all know increased rates of, we had deficits in our mental health capacity in states. And, one of the things that we lost during this pandemic is connectedness and social touch, right? So having social touch can be powerful, and also its reduction can lead to negative consequences. So at this point, you may be asking yourself, well, how does social touch even work at a biological level? How does it connect with the brain? And how might we even harness this as a mental health treatment? So now let me get into some of the biology. So we are wired for touch. So in this image, you can see we actually have thousands of nerve cells right under our skin surface. And these nerve cells, color-coded here in red, actually wrap around hair follicles and are very close to hair follicles, such that when we stroke the skin or indent the skin, these nerve cells are activated, okay? And I'll show you momentarily how this activation in the skin actually connects with circuits in the brain. So now let me get into some of our own work. So we use the mouse as a model system because we can do molecular, genetic, and neuronal experiments that are just not amenable to do in humans. So some work in my lab, we genetically engineer mice, as I'll show you momentarily, to target a small population of nerve cells in the skin. And we actually engineered these mice to express a light-sensitive protein so that we can activate these nerve cells with blue laser light in a technology called optogenetics. So this is what you see here. This is a section through skin of a genetically engineered mouse. And we've engineered these mice so that we can shine laser light here to turn on touch. And when we did this in mice, as I'll show you in a second, the animals can't talk to us. They can't tell us how they're experiencing this. So we had to design this experiment, this so-called conditioned place preference assay, so the animals could essentially vote with their feet, allowed us to know how they were experiencing this sensation. So in one chamber, we gave this blue laser light, and on the other side, we gave green laser light. We did this for a few days. Then we removed the lasers and asked, well, where do the animals prefer to spend their time? And lo and behold, we see that animals spend more time in environments where they receive that laser stimulation of touch. Really consistent with what we see in humans. They prefer this activation. So with this result, you may be asking, well, how does this even connect to neurons in the brain? Now let me show you our experiments here. So this slide is actually painstaking for me as a scientist because I'm winnowing down many years of very hard experiments into a single schematic that I'll briefly cover in 30 seconds. But what we actually did here were we traced the pathway from neurons in the skin all the way to the brain. So we went from the skin to the neurons in the spinal cord, from the spinal cord to the base of the brain, then to the brain's reward center. So it turns out there are about 3 to 4 nerve cells that can get you from the skin directly to the brain's reward center, this neuronal highway that we discovered. And once we got to the brain's reward center, we actually combined our skin stimulation with brain recordings, and we could see real-time release of this neuropeptide neuromodulator called dopamine in the brain's reward center. So taken together, this work that we discover begins to provide an explanation, a molecular explanation as to why touch and a hug feels good. Now, armed with this discovery, we actually had an aha moment. We thought, since we have a direct access to the brain's reward center through the skin, might we harness this information as a treatment? And we began to pursue this idea. And let me show you where we are thus far. So this work I'll show you here was led by Dr. Sasha Fulton. She actually did her PhD at Mount Sinai in New York City with Professor Ian Mays, who himself is a former One Mind Rising Star awardee. So we're kind of keeping it in the family here. But nonetheless, what Sasha did was there's a protocol where we can induce a traumatic experiment in mice, give them a chronic stress protocol. And after you do this in mice, just like in humans, the animals have depression-like behaviors. So what Sasha decided to do was, as the animals were going through these traumatic experiences, she shined the blue laser light to activate their touch neurons. And what we saw was quite interesting, okay? The mice appeared to be happier. So happy, in fact, they were actually transported to Napa Valley. These mice are actually under your seats right now. But in all seriousness, here's the data that support these cartoons. What Sasha was able to do was to increase sociability in these animals that are going through a stressful environment. On the left, with the control, when the animals were allowed to engage with other animals, we saw a reduction in sociability, and this was rescued when we gave this blue laser light stimulation, really suggesting to us that this may be a useful therapeutic. So as I wrap up with this One Mind support, what we're going to do is confirm and extend this work and look at other models. And more importantly, we want to begin to find small molecules that can activate these social touch neurons. And we'll begin in the mouse with the hope of moving over to sensory neurons, human sensory neurons in the skin. And finally, future outlook, we could imagine a world where if we can find molecules that activate these social touch neurons in the skin, could we put those molecules into a cream that we can just rub directly on our skin so that we can harness the positive benefits of social support into a therapy? So this is where we're going with this work. I just want to end by thanking the people in the lab that I work with, our funding sources, and thank you all for your attention.